Hello, this video is in complement to the topics introduced in Chapter 1 of the study of biology. And it is going to be explaining a few concepts regarding biological diversity. Biological diversity is on this planet is estimated to be somewhere between 10 to 100 million species of living things. And that would include all the plants, all the animals, fungi, bacteria, protists. And for that reason, having such diversity, it is necessary to have a system for classifying, organizing, and naming the different types of living things that live on this planet. About 2 million of those living things on this planet have been named, identified, and quite a few more are going to be discovered in the upcoming century. Some estimate that we only know the diversity of Earth at a rate of about 2% to 10%. And so that means that there's a lot of things that are yet to be discovered. There is a field in biology that is called taxonomy. And taxonomy deals with finding ways of identifying, naming, and categorizing organisms based on characteristics they share with others of the same kind and how they are different from others where there is no evidence of close relationship. Maybe there is a distance connection between species, but not a recent evolutionary history. What you can see here in this illustration, in the slide that I am talking about right now, is the classification for an animal like the black bear. And here you'll recognize names you've seen perhaps in a previous biology class, classification names that go from domain, which is the largest of the taxonomical names, or taxonomical groups, I should say. Domains are broken into kingdoms, kingdoms are broken into phyla, phyla into classes, orders, family, genus, and then the species. For the black bear, which is featured in this illustration, and the scientific name Ursus americanus, the scientific name will be a combination of the genus, which is Ursus, and americanus, which is the species epithet. And you can see that there are going to be other organisms that at first are going to be more closely related to the bear, like polar bears, grizzly bears, and a few others. And in terms of order, they are going to be all carnivores, but there are many other carnivores that are going to be included here, including this friend I have with me and I want to introduce to you. In a class survey, I had asked you if you had a pet, and I have one. This is my friend Mika, and Mika's my Chihuahua. She's actually my son's pet, but I take care of her too, so she's like my pet too. Mika is a female Chihuahua, and she is 8 years old. And so where would you place someone like an organism like Mika in this classification? Well, I can tell you that she has hair and she has canine teeth, which are characteristics of carnivores. So she will probably be found also over here in the order Carnivora, hair, place it with the mammals. But as we go further and further away from the species and those that are closely related, we're going to see that other organisms that don't seem to share resemblance to Mika are going to be found here. They are animals. And so what makes Mika an animal, and what makes something like a sea star or something like a butterfly or something like a sponge that lives in the ocean also an animal? Well, those are going to be some of the questions we're going to be exploring when we get into the second quarter of this Majors Biology series. So for now, I'm going to have Mika wave goodbye. It's like, bye-bye, class. And she has other stuff to go and run around in the house. I'm going to let her go, and I'm going to be right back with you guys. Okay, and I am back. So what I want you to learn at this point in our introduction to the study of biology is that all life can be classified into 3 domains. These are going to be the largest of the groups of classification we can have. The 3 domains are bacteria, Archaea, and Eukarya. Now remember that these domains are going to be putting in one domain organisms that share characteristics and keeping outside of that domain organisms that don't share the characteristics members of the one group possess. And here in this tree of life, I want you to notice something interesting. This is how all life on Earth can be represented, at least at the level of kingdoms. So bacteria takes one branch in the tree of life, and there is a second branch in the tree of life, and that is going to be another type of prokaryote organism. Also, like bacteria, they don't have nucleus. They do possess DNA, of course. But these single-cell organisms of Archaea, ironically, happen to be sharing a branch with the eukaryotes, which are going to include the plants and the animals, mostly multicellular organisms, but a few single-cell are going to be found over here. So some people ask, why don't we have both types of prokaryote organisms, bacteria-like cells, both branched together, placing them in the same branch? And the reason is going to be largely at the level of molecular and DNA differences. And the topic of bacteria is something we talk about in Bio 213, animals we talk about in Bio 212, and I hope to have the privilege to guide you through the exploration of those organisms as well in upcoming quarters. So let's take a look at these domains and what are the characteristics that are shared by these organisms. Beginning with the domain bacteria. Bacteria are going to be the most widespread organisms on Earth. They can be found living on just about any surface, including, if you're looking at my laser pointer, this is going to be the enamel of teeth. The fibers you see on the back, it's going to be part of the matrix of enamel. It's what the substance that makes our teeth hard. You can see here that there are going to be these round objects. Those are going to be types of bacteria, round bacteria, we'll call them coccus, and all types of cocci lining this enamel matrix. That is not good because it can eventually lead to tooth decay and the cavities. Here you see another type of bacterium. This is going to be a type of E. coli, one that at times can be beneficial, and there are a few of these species or strains of E. coli that can also be harmful to us. What do all bacteria have in common? They are going to be single-cell organisms, and they are going to be prokaryotic. By now, we understand that prokaryotic means no nucleus. They do have DNA, but it's just not surrounded by a nuclear envelope. Bacteria, for the most part, are going to be heterotrophic. Hetero means another. Trophic means feeding or eating. So heterotrophic organisms are those that have to feed on or eat something else. And so many bacteria will be feeding on dead things. Others are going to be feeding off of the resources found in the host cell. Sometimes they can go and live inside of a cell, and sometimes even those relationships can be beneficial, like some beneficial bacteria that live inside of the tissues of plants, particularly in the roots, and help plants obtain nitrogen. So when I talk about bacteria living inside of another organism, it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Think, for example, about the colonies of bacteria we have living inside of our intestine as well. Bacteria will be covered by a plasma membrane. They also have cell walls, and they have a capsule. The cell wall of bacteria is made of a matrix known as peptidoglycan, and that is also kind of unique to members of domain bacteria. It's something they only possess. What do we have in the domain Archaea? Well, these are also going to be unicellular organisms, but unlike bacteria, these members of domain Archaea are going to be represented in very ancient fossils. They are believed to be among the oldest organisms on Earth. They are also prokaryotic, but another characteristic of Archaea, these bacteria-like organisms of domain Archaea, is that they live in very harsh, extreme environments. The ones here colored in yellow, and you can see my laser pointer moving around them, these are going to be colonies of bacteria that live in places deep under the surface of the ocean, where as the tectonic plates open up, methane comes from underneath the Earth's ocean floor, and some of these bacteria can actually help obtain energy, help themselves to obtain energy from those inorganic sources. in the places where they live, it's just so dark that there is no light possibility, and consequently, they cannot make organic molecules using light. Here you can see one of these geysers in Yellowstone National Park, and this is not an exaggeration. These yellow and red and orange borders of this geyser, of this hot spring, is going to be made by colonies of bacteria that live in really hot environments. It's like nothing else can live in such extreme heat except for certain types of archaic bacteria. Methanogens, like the ones in this picture, can use methane, and thermophiles are going to be like the ones here in Yellowstone National Park, thriving in very hot environments. Some others like to live in places where there is a high level of salinity, and that is the meaning of the word halo. Halo means salt. Phile means loving. So the halophiles are the salt-loving, thermophiles are heat-loving, and methanogens are going to be those that originate in places where methane can be abundant. Another domain, now we're going to the third domain, the domain Eukarya, is going to include organisms we're more familiar with. Here we'll see the protists. There's actually many kingdoms of protists. Eukarya, in the sense of the protists, they are going to be mostly single-cell organisms. So we do have organisms with a nucleus, such as this amoeba you see right here. There's a nucleus right there. It's just one cell, and it is still going to be a eukaryote. That's because they have a nucleus. There's also other protists, like the examples of filamentous algae you see in this picture. They also have nucleated cells. They are eukaryotic, and they can make food by photosynthesis. Amoeba, like this protozoan you see right here, are going to be feeding on something else. So they are going to be heterotrophic, like most types of bacteria are going to be. Most protists are going to be found living in aquatic environments. That's the medium where they usually obtain the nutrients and the materials they need to survive. So keep in mind, the protists, we're not specifying what are the names of the kingdoms. When we get to Bio 213, we will talk about those kingdoms, but we'll just say that algae are photosynthetic and protozoa are going to be heterotrophic. Also in the domain Eukarya, we have the fungi. What makes them different is that they're going to be multicellular and they are going to be heterotrophic. With the protists, those who were multicellular were actually photoautotrophic. They made their own food. But let's focus on fungi. Heterotrophic, remember, this means that they have to feed on something else. The mushroom you see in this illustration is an example of a fungus. This is just the reproductive body. Most of the body of the fungus will be found living inside of the dirt, in the ground, where this organism can be found, feeding on usually decaying plant matter. They don't have specialized tissues, and this is going to be something that it's kind of unique to them when it comes to being multicellular and heterotrophic, and you will see why in a moment. There are some other organisms that are multicellular, heterotrophic, but they do have specialized tissues, and those will be the animals. But the fungi don't. When you look at the body of this fungus, the cells or groups of cells you see at this point, it's going to be about the same group of cells over here. All throughout the body of the organism, all the cells are going to look about the same. The cells do have a hard protective covering, a cell wall made of a polysaccharide known as chitin. We will be talking about chitin in probably the 1 week or two in this majors biology class. Plants belong to kingdom Plantae. They are multicellular, meaning the bodies are made up of many, many cells. They are eukaryotic. That means they have a nucleus. They are photosynthetic autotrophs, meaning that they use light to manufacture that synthesis, using light to manufacture their own food. So they feed themselves using light as a source of energy. They do possess specialized tissues. When you think, for example, about the photosynthetic tissues in the green parts of the leaf, those are different from the tissues in the stems where water is being transported. that'll be different from the tissues you find in flowers and fruits. And so that makes them different from algae, which were photosynthetic, and algae, some of those are multicellular, but they don't have the different kinds of tissues plants have. Plants have cell walls, and the cell walls are made of a different material. This is called cellulose. So if you're keeping track of what I'm saying, bacteria have cell walls, but it was made of something called peptidoglycan. Fungi have cell walls, but they're made of chitin. Plants have cell walls, but they're made of cellulose. So different organisms in different domains and different kingdoms may have cell walls, but the material of the cell walls will be different, and that places them in a different taxonomy group. Finally, my friend Mika is gone, but that's an example of an animal. Dogs, cats, gorillas, insects, butterflies, worms, all of those are examples of animals. Sponges that live in the ocean, mollusks, clams, octopus, all of those are examples of animals. And it seems to me like, how can we have so many different organisms in one group? Well, here are the unifying characteristics. Let's check them out. All animals are multicellular. All animals are eukaryotic. Well, other things are the same way. But look at this. They're heterotrophic. Wait a moment. You may say that sounds like a fungus. Oh, but watch this. Animals do possess specialized tissues, and their cells don't have cell walls. Specialized tissues can be exemplified by thinking about blood is a form of connective tissue. When you think about the matrix of bone, that's a type of connective tissue. Think about muscle tissue, nervous tissue, muscular tissue, skin tissue. All of those different tissues are made of different types of cells with different missions. Fungi didn't have that. But remember, we don't have cell walls either. And so that makes us unique. And so as you can see, every type of group we've seen in the domains, and for the domain Eukarya, the different kinds of kingdoms, there may be some things that are similar, but there will also be things that are unique and different and will lead to the classification of organisms into one group where they fit best. I hope this information, you find it useful in terms of thinking about what are the major kinds of organisms that we will also be discussing at different points as examples as we continue our exploration of Bio 211. This is only an introduction. I hope you're continuing to enjoy this introduction to biology.